Book 6. He said, and wept, then spread his sails before the winds, and reached at length the Cumaean shore. Their anchors dropped, his crew the vessels moor. They turn their heads to sea, their sterns to land, and greet with greedy joy the Italian strand. Some strike from clashing flints their fiery seed, some gather sticks, the kindled flames to feed, or search for hollow trees, and fell the woods, or trace through valleys the discovered floods. Thus, while their several charges they fulfill, the pious prince ascends the sacred hill where Phoebus is adored, and seeks the shade which hides from sight his venerable maid. Deep in a cave the Sibyl makes abode, thence full of fate returns and of the god. Through Trivia's grove they walk, and now behold and enter now the temple roofed with gold. When Daedalus, to fly the Cretan shore, his heavy limbs on jointed pinions bore, the first who sailed in air, it is sung by fame, to the Cumaean coast at length he came, and here alighting, built this costly frame. Inscribed to Phoebus, here he hung on high the steerage of his wings, that cut the sky. Then over the lofty gate his art embossed Androgeos, death, and offerings to his ghost. 7 youths from Athens yearly sent, to meet the fate appointed by revengeful Crete. And next to those the dreadful urn was placed, in which the destined names by lots were cast. The mournful parents stand around in tears, and rising Crete against their shore appears. There too, in living sculpture, might be seen the mad affection of the Cretan queen. Then how she cheats her bellowing lover's eye, the rushing leap, the doubtful progeny, the lower part a beast, a man above, the monument of their polluted love. Not far from thence, he graved the wondrous maze, 1,000 doors, 1,000 winding ways. Here dwells the monster, hid from human view, not to be found, but by the faithful clue, till the kind artist, moved with pious grief, lent to the loving maid this last relief, and all those erring paths described so well that Theseus conquered, and the monster fell. Here hapless Icarus had found his part, had not the father's grief restrained his art. He twice essayed to cast his son in gold, twice from his hands he dropped the forming mould. All this with wondering eyes Aeneas viewed, each varying object his delight renewed. Eager to read, the rest Achates came, and by his side the mad divining dame, the priestess of the god, Diphobe her name. Time suffers not, she said, to feed your eyes with empty pleasures. Haste the sacrifice, 7 bullocks yet unyoked, for Phoebus choose, and for Diana 7 unspotted ewes. This said, the servants urge the sacred rites, while to the temple she the prince invites. A spacious cave, within its farmost part, was hewed and fashioned by laborious art, through the hill's hollow sides. Before the place, 100 doors, 100 entries grace, as many voices issue, and the sound of Sibyl's words, as many times rebound. Now to the mouth they come, aloud she cries, this is the time, inquire your destinies. He comes, behold the god. Thus while she said, and shivering at the sacred entry stayed, her colour changed, her face was not the same, and hollow groans from her deep spirit came. Her hair stood up, convulsive rage possessed her trembling limbs, and heaved her labouring breast. Greater than humankind she seemed to look, and with an accent more than mortal spoke. Her staring eyes with sparkling fury roll, when all the god came rushing on her soul. Swiftly she turned, and foaming as she spoke, why this delay? She cried. The powers invoke. Thy prayers alone can open this abode, else vain are my demands, and dumb the god. She said no more. The trembling Trojans hear, overspread with a damp sweat, and holy fear. The prince himself, with awful dread possessed, his vows to great Apollo thus addressed, indulgent god, propitious power to Troy, swift to relieve, unwilling to destroy. Directed by whose hand the Dardan dart pierced the proud Grecian's only mortal part. Thus far, by fate's decrees and thy commands, through ambient seas, and through devouring sands, our exiled crew has sought the Ausonian ground. And now, at length, the flying coast is found. Thus far the fate of Troy, from place to place, with fury has pursued her wandering race. Here cease, ye powers, and let your vengeance end. Troy is no more, and can no more offend. And thou, O sacred maid, inspired to see the event of things in dark futurity, give me what heaven has promised to my fate, to conquer and command the Latian state, to fix my wandering gods, and find a place for the long exiles of the Trojan race. Then shall my grateful hands a temple rear to the twin gods, with vows and solemn prayer, and annual rites and festivals and games shall be performed to their auspicious names. Nor shalt thou want thy honours in my land, for there thy faithful oracles shall stand, preserved in shrines, and every sacred lay, which by thy mouth Apollo shall convey. All shall be treasured by a chosen train of holy priests, and ever shall remain. But oh, commit not thy prophetic mind to flitting leaves, the sport of every wind, lest they disperse in air our empty fate. Write not, but what the powers ordain, relate. Struggling in vain, impatient of her load, and labouring underneath the ponderous god, the more she strove to shake him from her breast, with more and far superior force he pressed, commands his entrance, and, without control, usurps her organs and inspires her soul. Now with a furious blast, the 100 doors ope of themselves, a rushing whirlwind roars within the cave, and Sibyl's voice restores. Escaped the dangers of the watery rain, yet more and greater ills by land remain. The coast, so long desired, nor doubt the event, thy troops shall reach. But, having reached, repent. Wars, horrid wars, I view a field of blood, and Tiber rolling with a purple flood. Simwa nor Xanthus shall be wanting there, a new Achilles shall in arms appear, and he too, goddess born. Fierce Juno's hate, added to hostile force, shall urge thy fate. To what strange nations shalt not thou resort, driven to solicit aid at every court? The cause the same which Ilium once oppressed, a foreign mistress, and a foreign guest. But thou, secure of soul, unbent with woes, the more thy fortune frowns, the more oppose. The dawnings of thy safety shall be shown, from whence thou least shalt hope, a Grecian town. Thus, from the dark recess the Sibyl spoke, and the resisting air the thunder broke, the cave rebellowed, and the temple shook. The ambiguous god, who ruled her labouring breast, in these mysterious words his mind expressed. Some truths revealed, in terms involved the rest. At length her fury fell, her foaming ceased, and ebbing in her soul the god decreased. Then thus the chief: no terror to my view, no frightful face of danger can be new. Inured to suffer, and resolved to dare, the fates, without my power, shall be without my care. This let me crave, since near your grove the road to hell lies open, and the dark abode which Acheron surrounds, the innavigable flood. Conduct me through the regions void of light, and lead me longing to my Father's sight. For him, 1,000 dangers I have sought, and rushing where the thickest Grecians fought, safe on my back the sacred burthen brought. He, for my sake, the raging ocean tried, and wrath of heaven, my still auspicious guide, and bore beyond the strength decrepit age supplied. Oft, since he breathed his last, in dead of night, his reverend image stood before my sight, enjoined to seek below his holy shade, conducted there by your unerring aid. But you, if pious minds by prayers are won, oblige the Father, and protect the Son. Yours is the power, nor Proserpine in vain has made you priestess of her nightly reign. If Orpheus, armed with his enchanting lyre, the ruthless king with pity could inspire, and from the shades below redeem his wife. If Pollux, offering his alternate life, could free his brother, and can daily go by turns aloft, by turns descend below, why name I Theseus, or his greater friend, who trod the downward path, and upward could ascend? Not less than theirs from Jove my lineage came, my mother greater, my descent the same. So prayed the Trojan prince, and while he prayed, his hand upon the holy altar laid. Then thus replied the prophetess divine: O goddess, born of great Anchises' line, the gates of hell are open night and day. Smooth the descent and easy is the way, but to return, and view the cheerful skies, in this the task, and mighty labour lies. To few great Jupiter imparts this grace, and those of shining worth and heavenly race. Betwixt those regions and our upper light, deep forests and impenetrable night possess the middle space. The infernal bounds Cocytus with his sable waves surrounds. But if so dire a love your soul invades, as twice below to view the trembling shades, if you so hard a toil will undertake, as twice to pass the innavigable lake, receive my counsel. In the neighbouring grove there stands a tree, the queen of Stygian Jove claims it her own. Thick woods and gloomy night conceal the happy plant from human sight. One bough it bears, but, wondrous to behold, the ductile rind and leaves of radiant gold. This from the vulgar branches must be torn, and to fair Proserpine the present born, ere leave be given to tempt the nether skies. The first thus rent a second will arise, and the same metal the same room supplies. Look round the wood with lifted eyes, to see the lurking gold upon the fatal tree. Then rend it off, as holy rites command, the willing metal will obey thy hand, following with ease. If favoured by thy fate, thou art foredoomed to view the Stygian state. If not, no labour can the tree constrain, and strength of stubborn arms and steel are vain. Besides, you know not while you here attend the unworthy fate of your unhappy friend. Breathless he lies, and his unburied ghost, deprived of funeral rites, pollutes your host. Pay first his pious dues, and for the dead, 2 sable sheep around his hearse be led. Then, living turfs upon his body lay. This done, securely take the destined way, to find the regions destitute of day. She said, and held her peace. Aeneas went sad from the cave, and full of discontent, unknowing whom the sacred Sibyl meant. Achates, the companion of his breast, goes grieving by his side, with equal cares oppressed. Walking, they talked, and fruitlessly divined what friend the priestess by those words designed. But soon they found an object to deplore. Misenus lay extended the shore, son of the god of winds. None so renowned the warrior trumpet in the field to sound, with breathing brass to kindle fierce alarms, and rouse to dare their fate in honourable arms. He served great Hector, and was ever near, not with his trumpet only, but his spear. But by Pelides' arms when Hector fell, he chose Aeneas, and he chose as well. Swoln with applause, and aiming still at more, he now provokes the sea-gods from the shore. With envy, Triton heard the martial sound, and the bold champion, for his challenge, drowned. Then cast his mangled carcass on the strand. The gazing crowd around the body stand. All weep, but most Aeneas mourns his fate, and hastens to perform the funeral state. In altar-wise a stately pile they rear, the basis broad below and top advanced in air. An ancient wood, fit for the work designed, the shady covert of the salvage kind. The Trojans found. The sounding axe is plied. Firs, pines, and pitch trees, and the towering pride of forest ashes feel the fatal stroke, and piercing wedges cleave the stubborn oak. Huge trunks of trees, felled from the steepy crown of the bare mountains, roll with ruin down. Armed like the rest the Trojan prince appears, and by his pious labour urges theirs. Thus while he wrought, revolving in his mind the ways to compass what his wish designed, he cast his eyes upon the gloomy grove, and then with vows implored the Queen of Love. "Oh, may thy power, propitious still to me, conduct my steps to find the fatal tree in this deep forest. Since the Sibyl's breath foretold, alas, too true, Misanius, death." Scarce had he said, when, full before his sight, 2 doves, descending from their airy flight, secure upon the grassy plain alight. He knew his mother's birds, and thus he prayed, "Be you my guides, with your auspicious aid, and lead my footsteps, till the branch be found, whose glittering shadow gilds the sacred ground. And thou, great parent, with celestial care, in this distress be present to my prayer." Thus having said, he stopped with watchful sight, observing still the motions of their flight, what course they took, what happy signs they show. They fed, and fluttering by degrees withdrew still farther from the place, but still in view. Hopping and flying, thus they led him on to the slow lake, whose baleful stench to shun, they winged their flight aloft. Then, stooping low, perched on the double tree that bears the golden bough. Through the green leaves, the glittering shadows glow, as, on the sacred oak, the wintry mistletoe, where the proud mother views her precious brood, and happier branches, which she never sowed. Such was the glittering, such the ruddy rind, and dancing leaves that wantoned in the wind. He seized the shining bough with griping hold, and rent away, with ease, the lingering gold. Then to the Sibyl's palace bore the prize. Meantime the Trojan troops, with weeping eyes, to dead Maecenas pay his obsequies. First from the ground, a lofty pile they rear, of pitch trees, oaks, and pines, and unctuous fir. The fabric's front with cypress twigs they strew, and stick the sides with boughs of baleful yew. The topmost part his glittering arms adorn. Warm waters then, in brazen cauldrons borne, are poured to wash his body, joint by joint, and fragrant oils the stiffened limbs anoint. With groans and cries Maecenas they deplore. Then on a bier, with purple covered over, the breathless body, thus bewailed, they lay, and fire the pile, their faces turned away. Such reverend rites their fathers used to pay. Pure oil and incense on the fire they throw, and fat of victims, which his friends bestow. These gifts the greedy flames to dust devour. Then on the living coals red wine they pour, and last, the relics by themselves dispose, which in a brazen urn the priests enclose. Old Corineus compassed thrice the crew, and dipped an olive branch in holy dew, which thrice he sprinkled round, and thrice aloud invoked the dead, and then dismissed the crowd. But good Aeneas ordered on the shore a stately tomb, whose top a trumpet bore, a soldier's falchion, and a seaman's oar. Thus was his friend interred, and deathless fame still to the lofty cape consigns his name. These rites performed, the prince, without delay, hastes to the netherworld his destined way. Deep was the cave, and downward as it went from the wide mouth, a rocky rough descent. And here the access a gloomy grove defends, and there the unnavigable lake extends, over whose unhappy waters, void of light, no bird presumes to steer his airy flight. Such deadly stenches from the depths arise, and steaming sulphur that infects the skies. From hence the Grecian bards their legends make, and give the name Avernus to the lake. 4 sable bullocks, in the yoke untaught, for sacrifice the pious hero brought. The priestess pours the wine betwixt their horns, then cuts the curling hair. That first oblation burns, invoking Hecate hither to repair, a powerful name in hell and upper air. The sacred priests with ready knives bereave the beasts of life, and in full bowls receive the streaming blood. A lamb to hell and night, the sable wool without a streak of white, Aeneas offers, and by fate's decree, a barren heifer, Proserpine, to thee, with holocausts, he Pluto's altar fills. 7 brawny bulls with his own hand he kills, then on the broiling entrails oil he pours, which, ointed thus, the raging flame devours. Late the nocturnal sacrifice begun, nor ended till the next returning sun. Then earth began to bellow, trees to dance, and howling dogs in glimmering light advance, ere Hecate came. Far hence be souls profane, the Sibyl cried, and from the grove abstain. Now, Trojan, take the way thy fates afford, assume thy courage, and unsheathe thy sword, she said, and passed along the gloomy space. The prince pursued her steps with equal pace. Ye realms, yet unrevealed to human sight, ye gods who rule the regions of the night, ye gliding ghosts, permit me to relate the mystic wonders of your silent state. Obscure they went through dreary shades, that led along the waste dominions of the dead. Thus wander travellers in woods by night, by the moon's doubtful and malignant light, when Jove in dusky clouds involves the skies, and the faint crescent shoots by fits before their eyes. Just in the gate, and in the jaws of hell, revengeful cares and sullen sorrows dwell, and pale diseases and repining age, want, fear, and famine's unresisted rage here toils, and death's half-brother sleep, forms terrible to view, their sentry keep, with anxious pleasures of a guilty mind, deep frauds before, and open force behind the furies, iron beds and strife, that shakes her hissing tresses and unfolds her snakes. Full in the midst of this infernal road, an elm displays her dusky arms abroad. The god of sleep there hides his heavy head, and empty dreams on every leaf are spread. Of various forms unnumbered spectres more, centaurs and double shapes, besiege the door. Before the passage, horrid Hydra stands, and Briareus with all his 100 hands, Gorgons, Geryon with his triple frame, and vain Chimera vomits empty flame. The chief unsheathed his shining steel, prepared, though seized with sudden fear, to force the guard, offering his brandished weapon at their face. Had not the Sibyl stopped his eager pace, and told him what those empty phantoms were, forms without bodies, and impassive air. Hence to deep Acheron they take their way, whose troubled eddies, thick with ooze and clay, are whirled aloft, and in Costus lost. There Charon stands, who rules the dreary coast, a sordid god. Down from his hoary chin a length of beard descends, uncombed, unclean. His eyes, like hollow furnaces on fire. A girdle, foul with grease, binds his obscene attire. He spreads his canvas, with his pole he steers, the freights of flitting ghosts in his thin bottom bears. He looked in years, yet in his years was seen a youthful vigour and autumnal green. An airy crowd came rushing where he stood, which filled the margin of the fatal flood, husbands and wives, boys and unmarried maids, and mighty heroes, more majestic shades, and youths entombed before their fathers' eyes, with hollow groans and shrieks and feeble cries, thick as the leaves in autumn strow the woods, or fowls, by winter forced, forsake the floods, and wing their hasty flight to happier lands. Such, and so thick, the shivering army stands, and press for passage with extended hands. Now these, now those, the surly boatman bore, the rest he drove to distance from the shore. The hero, who beheld with wondering eyes the tumult mixed with shrieks, laments, and cries, asked of his guide what the rude concourse meant, why to the shore the thronging people bent, what forms of law among the ghosts were used, why some were ferried over, and some refused. Son of Anchises, offspring of the gods, the Sibyl said, you see the Stygian floods, the sacred stream which heaven's imperial state attests in oaths, and fears to violate. The ghosts rejected are the unhappy crew deprived of sepulchres and funeral due. The boatman, Charon, those, the buried host, he ferries over to the farther coast, nor dares his transport vessel cross the waves with such whose bones are not composed in graves. 100 years they wander on the shore, at length, their penance done, are wafted over. The Trojan chief his forward pace repressed, revolving anxious thoughts within his breast. He saw his friends, who, whelmed beneath the waves, their funeral honours claimed, and asked their quiet graves. The lost Leucaspis in the crowd he knew, and the brave leader of the Lycian crew, whom on the Tyrrhene seas the tempests met, the sailors mastered, and the ship overset. Amidst the spirits Palinurus pressed, yet fresh from life, a new admitted guest, who, while he steering viewed the stars, and bore his course from Afric to the Latian shore, fell headlong down. The Trojan fixed his view, and scarcely through the gloom the sullen shadow knew. Then thus the prince, what envious power, O friend, brought your loved life to this disastrous end? For Phoebus, ever true in all he said, has in your fate alone my faith betrayed. The god foretold you should not die, before you reached, secure from seas, the Italian shore. Is this the unerring power? The ghost replied. Nor Phoebus flattered, nor his answers lied, nor envious gods have sent me to the deep, but while the stars and course of heaven I keep, my wearied eyes were seized with fatal sleep. I fell, and with my weight, the helm constrained was drawn along, which yet my gripe retained. Now by the winds and raging waves I swear, your safety more than mine, was then my care, lest of the guide bereft the rudder lost, your ship should run against the rocky coast. 3 blustering nights, borne by the southern blast, I floated, and discovered land at last. High on a mounting wave my head I bore, forcing my strength and gathering to the shore. Panting, but past the danger, Now I seized the craggy cliffs, and my tired members eased. While cumbered with my dropping clothes, I lay, the cruel nation, covetous of prey, stained with my blood the unhospitable coast, and now, by winds and waves, my lifeless limbs are tossed, which avert, by yon ethereal light, which I have lost for this eternal night. Or, if by dearer ties you may be won, by your dead sire, and by your living son, redeem from this reproach my wandering ghost, or with your navy seek the Velin coast, and in a peaceful grave my corpse compose. Or, if a nearer way your mother shows, without whose aid you durst not undertake this frightful passage over the Stygian lake, lend to this wretch your hand, and waft him over to the sweet banks of yon forbidden shore. Scarce had he said, the prophetess began, What hopes delude thee, miserable man? Thinkest thou, thus unentombed, to cross the floods, to view the furies and infernal gods, and visit, without leave, the dark abodes? Attend the term of long revolving years. Fate and the dooming gods are deaf to tears. This comfort of thy dire misfortune take. The wrath of heaven, inflicted for thy sake, with vengeance, shall pursue the inhuman coast, till they propitiate thy offended ghost, and raise a tomb, with vows and solemn prayer, and Palinurus, name the place shall bear. This calmed his cares, soothed with his future fame, and pleased to hear his propagated name. Now nearer to the Stygian lake they draw, whom from the shore the surly boatman saw, observed their passage through the shady wood, and marked their near approaches to the flood. Then thus he called aloud, inflamed with wrath, Mortal, whatever, who this forbidden path in arms presumest to tread, I charge thee, stand, and tell thy name and business in the land. Know this, the realm of night, the Stygian shore, my boat conveys no living bodies over, nor was I pleased great Theseus once to bear, who forced a passage with his pointed spear, nor strong Alcides, men of mighty fame, and from the immortal gods their lineage came. In fetters one the barking porter tied, and took him trembling from his sovereign's side. Two sought by force to seize his beauteous bride. To whom the Sibyl thus, Compose thy mind, nor frauds are here contrived, nor force designed. Still may the dog the wandering troops constrain of airy ghosts, and vex the guilty train, and with her grisly lord his lovely queen remain. The Trojan chief, whose lineage is from Jove, much famed for arms, and more for filial love, is sent to seek his sire, in your Elysian grove. If neither piety, nor heaven's command, can gain his passage to the Stygian strand, this fatal present shall prevail at least. Then showed the shining bow, concealed within her vest. No more was needful, for the gloomy god stood mute with awe, to see the golden rod. Admired the destined offering to his queen, a venerable gift, so rarely seen. His fury thus appeased, he puts to land, the ghosts forsake their seats at his command, he clears the deck, receives the mighty freight, the leaky vessel groans beneath the weight. Slowly she sails, and scarcely stems the tides, the pressing water pours within her sides. His passengers at length are wafted over, exposed in muddy weeds, upon the miry shore. No sooner landed, in his den they found the triple porter of the Stygian sound, grim Cerberus, who soon began to rear his crested snakes, and armed his bristling hair. The prudent Sibyl had before prepared a sop, in honey steeped, to charm the guard, which, mixed with powerful drugs, she cast before his greedy grinning jaws, just OPED to roar. With 3 enormous mouths he gapes, and straight, with hunger pressed, devours the pleasing bait. Long draughts of sleep his monstrous limbs enslave, he reels, and falling, fills the spacious cave. The keeper charmed, the chief without delay passed on, and took the irremediable way. Before the gates, the cries of babes new-born, whom fate had from their tender mothers torn, assault his ears, then those, whom form of laws condemned to die, when traitors judged their cause. Nor want they lots, nor judges to review the wrongful sentence, and award anew, Minos, the strict inquisitor, appears, and lives and crimes, with his assessors, hears. Round in his urn the blended balls he rolls, absolves the just, and dooms the guilty souls. The next, in place and punishment, are they who prodigally throw their souls away. Fools, who, repining at their wretched state, and loathing anxious life, suborn their fate. With late repentance now they would retrieve the bodies they forsook, and wish to live, their pains and poverty desire to bear, to view the light of heaven, and breathe the vital air. But fate forbids. The Stygian floods oppose, and with circling streams the captive souls enclose. Not far from thence, the mournful fields appear so called from lovers that inhabit there. The souls whom that unhappy flame invades, in secret solitude and myrtle shades make endless moans, and, pining with desire, lament too late their unextinguished fire. Here Procris Eriphyle here he found, bearing her breast yet bleeding with the wound made by her son. He saw pacify there, with Phaedra's ghost, a foul incestuous pair. There Laodamia, with Evadne, moves, unhappy both, but loyal in their loves. Caeneus, a woman once, and once a man, but ending in the sex she first began. Not far from these Phoenician Dido stood, fresh from her wound, her bosom bathed in blood, whom, when the Trojan hero hardly knew, obscure in shades, and with a doubtful view, doubtful as he who sees, through dusky night, or thinks he sees, the moon's uncertain light. With tears he first approached the sullen shade, and as his love inspired him, thus he said, "Unhappy queen, then is the common breath of rumour true in your reported death, and I, alas, the cause. By heaven I vow, and all the powers that rule the realms below, unwilling I forsook your friendly state, commanded by the gods, and forced by fate, those gods, that fate, whose unresisted might have sent me to these regions void of light, through the vast empire of eternal night. Nor dared I to presume that, pressed with grief, my flight should urge you to this dire relief. Stay, stay your steps, and listen to my vows. It is the last interview that fate allows." In vain he thus attempts her mind to move with tears and prayers, and late repenting love. Disdainfully she looked, then turning round, but fixed her eyes unmoved upon the ground, and what he says and swears regards no more than the deaf rocks when the loud billows roar, but whirled away, to shun his hateful sight, hid in the forest and the shades of night. Then sought Sychaeus through the shady grove, who answered all her cares, and equalled all her love. Some pious tears the pitying hero paid, and followed with his eyes the flitting shade, then took the forward way, by fate ordained, and with his guide, the farther fields attained, where, severed from the rest, the warrior souls remained. Tydeus he met with Meleager's race, the pride of armies, and the soldiers, Grace, and pale Adrastus with his ghastly face. Of Trojan chiefs he viewed a numerous train, all much lamented, all in battle slain, Glaucus and Medon, high above the rest, Antenor's sons, and Ceres, sacred priest, and proud Idaeus, Priam's charioteer, who shakes his empty reins, and aims his airy spear. The gladsome ghosts, encircling troops, attend and with unwearied eyes behold their friend, delight to hover near, and long to know what business brought him to the realms below. But Argive chiefs, and Agamemnon's train, when his refulgent arms flashed through the shady plain, fled from his well-known face, with wonted fear, as when his thundering sword and pointed spear drove headlong to their ships, and gleaned the routed rear. They raised a feeble cry, with trembling notes, but the weak voice deceived their gasping throats. Here Priam's son, Deiphobus, he found, whose face and limbs were one continued wound. Dishonest, with lopped arms, the youth appears, spoiled of his nose, and shortened of his ears. He scarcely knew him, striving to disown his blotted form, and blushing to be known, and therefore first began, "O Susa's race, who durst thy faultless figure thus deface? What heart could wish, what hand inflict, this dire disgrace? 'Twas famed, that in our last and fatal night, your single prowess long sustained the fight. till tired, not forced. A glorious fate you chose, and fell upon a heap of slaughtered foes. But in remembrance of so brave a deed, a tomb and funeral honours I decreed. Thrice called your manes on the Trojan plains, the place your armour and your name retains. Your body too I sought, and had I found, designed for burial in your native ground. The ghost replied, Your piety has paid all needful rites to rest my wandering shade. But cruel fate, and my more cruel wife, to Grecian swords betrayed my sleeping life. These are the monuments of Helen's love. The shame I bear below, the marks I bore above. You know in what deluding joys we passed the night that was by heaven decreed our last. For, when the fatal horse, descending down, pregnant with arms, overwhelmed the unhappy town, she feigned nocturnal orgies. Left my bed, and mixed with Trojan dames the dances led then, waving high her torch the signal made, which roused the Grecians from their ambuscade. With watching overworn, with cares oppressed, unhappy, I had laid me down to rest, and heavy sleep my weary limbs possessed. Meantime my worthy wife our arms mislaid, and from beneath my head my sword conveyed, the door unlatched, and with repeated calls invites her former lord within my walls. Thus in her crime her confidence she placed, and with new treasons would redeem the past. What need I more? Into the room they ran, and meanly murdered a defenceless man. Ulysses, basely born, first led the way. Avenging powers, with justice if I pray, that fortune be their own another day. But answer you, and in your turn relate, what brought you living to the Stygian state, driven by the winds and errors of the sea, or did you heaven's superior doom obey? Or tell what other chance conducts your way, to view with mortal eyes our dark retreats, tumults and torments of the infernal seats. While thus in talk the flying hours they pass, the sun had finished more than half his race, and they, perhaps, in words and tears, had spent the little time of stay which heaven had lent. But thus the Sibyl chides their long delay. Night rushes down, and headlong drives the day. It is here in different paths. The way divides the right to Pluto's golden palace, guides the left to that unhappy region tends, which to the depth of Tartarus descends, the seat of night profound and punished fiends. Then thus dear Phoebus, O sacred maid, forbear to chide, and be your will obeyed. Lo, to the secret shadows I retire, to pay my penance till my years expire. Proceed, auspicious prince, with glory crowned, and born to better fates than I have found. He said, and while he said, his steps he turned to secret shadows, and in silence mourned. The hero, looking on the left, espied a lofty tower, and strong on every side with treble walls, which Phlegethon surrounds, whose fiery flood the burning empire bounds. And, pressed betwixt the rocks, the bellowing noise resounds wide is the fronting gate, and, raised on high with adamantine columns, threats the sky. Vain is the force of man, and heaven's as vain, to crush the pillars which the piles sustain. Sublime on these a tower of steel is reared, and dire Tisiphone there keeps the ward, girt in her sanguine gown, by night and day, observant of the souls that pass the downward way. From hence are heard the groans of ghosts, the pains of sounding lashes, and of dragging chains. The Trojan stood astonished at their cries, and asked his guide from whence those yells arise, and what the crimes, and what the tortures were, and loud laments that rent the liquid air. She thus replied, The chaste and holy race are all forbidden this polluted place, but Hecate, when she gave to rule the woods, then led me trembling through these dire abodes, and taught the tortures of the avenging gods. These are the realms of unrelenting fate, and awful Rhadamanthus rules the state. He hears and judges each committed crime, inquires into the manner, place, and time. The conscious wretch must all his acts reveal, loath to confess, unable to conceal. From the first moment of his vital breath, to his last hour of unrepenting death. Straight over the guilty ghost, the Fury shakes the sounding whip, and brandishes her snakes, and the pale sinner, with her sisters, takes. Then, of itself, unfolds the eternal door. With dreadful sounds the brazen hinges roar. You see, before the gate, what stalking ghost commands the guard? What sentries keep the post? More formidable Hydra stands within, whose jaws with iron teeth severely grin. The gaping gulf low to the centre lies, and twice as deep as earth is distant from the skies. The rivals of the gods, the Titan race, here, singed with lightning, roll within the unfathomed space. Here lie the Alaean twins, I saw them both, enormous bodies, of gigantic growth, who dared in fight the thunderer to defy, affect his heaven, and force him from the sky. Salmoneus, suffering cruel pains I found, for emulating Jove, the rattling sound of mimic thunder, and the glittering blaze of pointed lightnings, and their forky rays. Through Elis and the Grecian towns he flew, the audacious wretch 4 fiery coursers drew, he waved a torch aloft, and madly vain, sought godlike worship from a servile train. Ambitious fool, with horny hoofs to pass over hollow arches of resounding brass, to rival thunder in its rapid course, and imitate inimitable force. But he, the King of Heaven, obscure on high, bared his red arm, and, launching from the sky his writhen bolt, not shaking empty smoke, down to the deep abyss the flaming felon strook. There Titus was to see, who took his birth from heaven, his nursing from the foodful earth. Here his gigantic limbs, with large embrace, enfold 9 acres of infernal space. A ravenous vulture, in his open side, her crooked beak and cruel talons tried, still for the growing liver digged his breast, the growing liver still supplied the feast, still are his entrails fruitful to their pains. The immortal hunger lasts, the immortal food remains. Ixion and Perithous I could name, and more Thessalian chiefs of mighty fame. High over their heads a mouldering rock is placed, that promises a fall, and shakes at every blast. They lie below, on golden beds displayed, and genial feasts with regal pomp are made. The Queen of Furies by their sides is set, and snatches from their mouths the untasted meat, which if they touch, her hissing snakes she rears, tossing her torch, and thundering in their ears. Then they, who brothers better claim disown, expel their parents, and usurp the throne, defraud their clients, and to lucre sold, sit brooding on unprofitable gold, who dare not give, and even refuse to lend to their poor kindred, or a wanting friend. Vast is the throng of these, nor less the train of lustful youths, for foul adultery slain, hosts of deserters, who their honour sold, and basely broke their faith for bribes of gold. All these within the dungeon's depth remain, despairing pardon and expecting pain, ask not what pains, nor farther seek to know their process, or the forms of law below. Some roll a weighty stone, some, laid along and bound with burning wires, on spokes of wheels are hung unhappy Theseus, doomed forever there, is fixed by fate on his eternal chair. And wretched Phlegyas warns the world with cries, could warning make the world more just or wise? Learn righteousness, and dread the avenging deities. To tyrants, others have their country sold, imposing foreign lords for foreign gold. Some have old laws repealed, new statutes made, not as the people pleased, but as they paid. With incest some their daughters, bed profaned, all dared the worst of ills, and what they dared attained. Had I 100 mouths, 100 tongues, and throats of brass, inspired with iron lungs, I could not half those horrid crimes repeat, nor half the punishments those crimes have met. But let us haste our voyage to pursue. The walls of Pluto's palace are in view. The gate, and iron arch above it, stands on anvils, laboured by the Cyclops' hands. Before our farther way the fates allow, here must we fix on high the golden bough, she said. And through the gloomy shades they passed, and chose the middle path. Arrived at last, the prince with living water sprinkled over his limbs and body, then approached the door, possessed the porch, and on the front above, he fixed the fatal bough required by Pluto's love. These holy rites performed, they took their way, where long extended plains of pleasure lay, the verdant fields with those of heaven may vie, with ether vested, and a purple sky, the blissful seats of happy souls below. Stars of their own and their own suns they know, their airy limbs in sports they exercise, and on the green contend the wrestler's prize. Some in heroic verse divinely sing, others in artful measures led the ring. The Thracian bard, surrounded by the rest, there stands conspicuous in his flowing vest. His flying fingers and harmonious quill strikes 7 distinguished notes, and 7 at once they fill. Here found they Zeus's old heroic race, born better times and happier years to grace. Assaracus and Ilus here enjoy perpetual fame, with him who founded Troy. The chief beheld their chariots from afar, their shining arms and coursers trained to war, their lances fixed in earth, their steeds around, free from their harness, graze the flowery ground. The love of horses which they had, alive and care of chariots, after death survive. Some cheerful souls were feasting on the plain. Some did the song, and some the choir maintain, beneath a laurel shade, where mighty Po mounts up to woods above, and hides his head below. Here patriots live, who, for their country's good in fighting fields, were prodigal of blood. Priests of unblemished lives here make abode, and poets worthy their inspiring God, and searching wits, of more mechanic parts, who graced their age with new invented arts, those who to worth their bounty did extend, and those who knew that bounty to commend. The heads of these with holy fillets bound, and all their temples were with garlands crowned. To these the Sibyl thus her speech addressed, and first to him surrounded by the rest, towering his height, and ample was his breast. Say, happy souls, divine Musaeus, say, where lives Anchises, and where lies our way to find the hero, for whose only sake we sought the dark abodes, and crossed the bitter lake? To this the sacred poet thus replied: In no fixed place the happy souls reside. In groves we live, and lie on mossy beds, by crystal streams, that murmur through the meads, but pass yon easy hill, and thence descend, the path conducts you to your journey's end. This said, he led them up the mountain's brow, and shows them all the shining fields below. They wind the hill, and through the blissful meadows go. But old Anchises, in a flowery vale, reviewed his mustered race, and took the tale those happy spirits which, ordained by fate, for future beings and new bodies wait, with studious thought, observed the illustrious throng, in nature's order as they passed along, their names, their fates, their conduct and their care, in peaceful senates and successful war. He, when Aeneas on the plain appears, meets him with open arms, and falling tears. Welcome, he said, the gods' undoubted race. O long expected to my dear embrace, once more it is given me to behold your face. The love and pious duty which you pay have passed the perils of so hard a way. It is true, computing times, I now believe the happy day approached, nor are my hopes deceived. What length of lands, what oceans have you passed, what storms sustained, and on what shores been cast? How have I feared your fate, but feared it most, when love assailed you, on the Libyan coast. To this the filial duty thus replies: Your sacred ghost before my sleeping eyes appeared, and often urged this painful enterprise. After long tossing on the Tyrrhene sea, my navy rides at anchor in the bay. But reach your hand, O parent shade, nor shun the dear embraces of your longing son, he said, and falling tears his face bedew. Then thrice around his neck his arms he threw, and thrice the flitting shadow slipped away, like winds or empty dreams that fly the day. Now, in a secret vale, the Trojan sees a separate grove, through which a gentle breeze plays with a passing breath, and whispers through the trees. And, just before the confines of the wood, the gliding Lethe leads her silent flood. About the boughs an airy nation flew, thick as the humming bees that hunt the golden dew. In summer's heat on tops of lilies feed, and creep within their bells to suck the balmy seed. The winged army roams the fields around, the rivers and the rocks remurmur to the sound. Aeneas wondering stood, then asked the cause which to the stream the crowding people draws. Then thus the sire: The souls that throng the flood are those to whom by fate are other bodies owed. In Lethe's lake they long oblivion taste, of future life secure, forgetful of the past. Long has my soul desired this time and place, to set before your sight your glorious race, that this presaging joy may fire your mind to seek the shores by destiny designed. O Father, can it be that souls sublime return to visit our terrestrial clime, and that the generous mind, released by death, can covet lazy limbs and mortal breath? Anchises then, in order, thus begun to clear those wonders to his godlike son. Know, first, that heaven and earth's compacted frame, and flowing waters, and the starry flame, and both the radiant lights, one common soul inspires, and this active mind, infused through all the space, unites and mingles with the mighty mass. Hence men and beasts the breath of life obtain, and birds of air, and monsters of the main. The ethereal vigour is in all the same, and every soul is filled with equal flame, as much as earthy limbs, and grosser lay of mortal members, subject to decay, blunt not the beams of heaven and edge of day. From this coarse mixture of terrestrial parts, desire and fear by turns possess their hearts, and grief, and joy, nor can the grovelling mind, in the dark dungeon of the limbs confined, assert the native skies, or own its heavenly kind, nor death itself can wholly wash their stains. But long contracted filth even in the soul remains, the relics of inveterate vice they wear, and spots of sin obscene in every face appear. For this are various penances enjoined, and some are hung to bleach upon the wind, some plunged in waters, others purged in fires, till all the dregs are drained, and all the rust expires. All have their manes, and those manes bear. The few, so cleansed, to these abodes repair, and breathe, in ample fields, the soft Elysian air. Then are they happy, when by length of time the scurf is worn away of each committed crime. No speck is left of their habitual stains, but the pure ether of the soul remains. But, when 1,000 rolling years are past, so long their punishments and penance last, whole droves of minds are by the driving God compelled to drink the deep Lethean flood in large forgetful draughts, to steep the cares of their past labours and their irksome years, that unremembering of its former pain. The soul may suffer mortal flesh again. Thus having said, the Father Spirit leads the priestess and his Son through swarms of shades, and takes a rising ground, from thence to see the long procession of his progeny. Survey, pursued the sire, this airy throng, as, offered to thy view, they pass along. These are the Italian names, which fate will join with ours, and graph upon the Trojan line. Observe the youth who first appears in sight, and holds the nearest station to the light, already seems to snuff the vital air, and leans just forward, on a shining spear. Silvius is he, thy last begotten race, but first in order sent, to fill thy place. An Alban name, but mixed with Dardan blood, born in the covert of a shady wood, him fair Lavinia, thy surviving wife, shall breed in groves, to lead a solitary life. In Alba he shall fix his royal seat, and, born a king, a race of kings beget. Then Procus, honour of the Trojan name, Capys and Numitor, of endless fame. A second Silvius after these appears, Silvius Aeneas, for thy name he bears, for arms and justice equally renowned, who, late restored in Alba shall be crowned. How great they look! How vigorously they wield their weighty lances and sustain the shield! But they, who crowned with oaken wreaths appear, shall Gabian walls and strong Fidena rear, Nomentum, Bola, with Pometia found, and raise Calatian towers on rocky ground. All these shall then be towns of mighty fame, though, now they lie obscure, and lands without a name. See Romulus the Great, born to restore the crown that once his injured grandsire wore. This prince a priestess of your blood shall bear, and like his sire in arms he shall appear. 2 rising crests his royal head adorn, born from a god, himself to godhead born. His sire already signs him for the skies, and marks the seat amidst the deities. Auspicious chief, thy race, in times to come, shall spread the conquests of imperial Rome, Rome, whose ascending towers shall heaven invade, involving earth and ocean in her shade. High as the mother of the gods in place, and proud, like her, of an immortal race. Then, when in pomp she makes the Phrygian round, with golden turrets on her temples crowned. 100 gods her sweeping train supply, her offspring all, and all command the sky. Now fix your sight, and stand intent, to see your Roman race and Julian progeny. The mighty Caesar waits his vital hour, impatient for the world, and grasps his promised power. But next behold the youth of form divine, Caesar himself, exalted in his line. Augustus promised oft, and long foretold, sent to the realm that Saturn ruled of old, born to restore a better age of gold. Afric and India shall his power obey, he shall extend his propagated sway beyond the solar year, without the starry way, where Atlas turns the rolling heavens around, and his broad shoulders with their lights are crowned. At his foreseen approach, already quake the Caspian kingdoms and Maeotian lake, their seers behold the tempest from afar, and threatening oracles denounce the war. Nile hears him knocking at his sevenfold gates, and seeks his hidden spring, and fears his nephew's fates. Nor Hercules more lands or labours knew, not though the brazen-footed hind he slew, freed Erymanthus from the foaming boar, and dipped his arrows in Lernaean gore, nor Bacchus, turning from his Indian war, by tigers drawn triumphant in his car, from Nissus, top descending on the plains, with curling vines around his purple reins. And doubt we yet through dangers to pursue the paths of honour, and a crown in view. But what's the man who from afar appears? His head with olive crowned, his hand a censer bears. His hoary beard and holy vestments bring his lost idea back. I know the Roman king. He shall to peaceful Rome new laws ordain, called from his mean abode a sceptre to sustain. Him Tullus next in dignity succeeds, an active prince, and prone to martial deeds. He shall his troops for fighting fields prepare, disused to toils and triumphs of the war. By dint of sword his crown he shall increase, and scour his armour from the rust of peace, whom Ancus follows, with a fawning air but vain within, and proudly popular. Next view the Tarquin kings, the avenging sword of Brutus, justly drawn and Rome restored. He first renews the rods and axe severe, and gives the consuls royal robes to wear. His sons who seek the tyrant to sustain, and long for arbitrary lords again, with ignominy scourged, in open sight, he dooms to death deserved, asserting public right. Unhappy man, to break the pious laws of nature, pleading in his children's cause. Howe'er the doubtful fact is understood, it is love of honour, and his country's good, the consul, not the father, sheds the blood. Behold Torquatus the same track pursue, and next, the two devoted Decii view, the Drusian line, Camillus loaded home with standards well redeemed, and foreign foes overcome the pair you see in equal armour shine. Now, friends below, in close embraces join. But when they leave the shady realms of night, and clothed in bodies breathe your upper light, with mortal hate each other shall pursue. What wars, what wounds, what slaughter shall ensue? From Alpine heights the father first descends, his daughter's husband in the plain attends, his daughter's husband arms his eastern friends. Embrace again, my sons, be foes no more, nor stain your country with her children's gore. And thou the first, lay down thy lawless claim, thou of my blood, who bearest the Julian name. Another comes, who shall in triumph ride, and to the capital his chariot guide, from conquered Corinth, rich with Grecian spoils. And yet another, famed for warlike toils, on Argos shall impose the Roman laws, and on the Greeks revenge the Trojan cause, shall drag in chains their Achillean race, shall vindicate his ancestors, disgrace and Pallas, for her violated place. Great Cato there, for gravity renowned, and conquering Cossus goes with laurels crowned. Who can omit the Gracchi? Who declare the Scipios' worth? Those thunderbolts of war, the double bane of Carthage. Who can see without esteem for virtuous poverty, severe Fabricius, or can cease, admire the ploughman consul in his coarse attire? Tired as I am, my praise the Fabii claim, and thou, great hero, greatest of thy name, ordained in war to save the sinking state, and by delays to put a stop to fate. Let others better mould the running mass of metals, and inform the breathing brass, and soften into flesh a marble face, plead better at the bar, describe the skies, and when the stars descend, and when they rise. But, Rome, it is thine alone, with awful sway, to rule mankind, and make the world obey, disposing peace and war by thy own majestic way, to tame the proud, the fettered slave to free. These are imperial arts, and worthy thee. He paused, and while with wondering eyes they viewed the passing spirits, thus his speech renewed. See great Marcellus, how, untired in toils, he moves with manly grace, how rich with regal spoils. He, when his country, threatened with alarms, requires his courage and his conquering arms, shall more than once the Punic bands affright, shall kill the Gaulish king in single fight, then to the capital in triumph move, and the third spoils shall grace fair Eretrian Jove. Aeneas here beheld, of form divine, a godlike youth in glittering armour shine, with great Marcellus keeping equal pace, but gloomy were his eyes, dejected was his face. He saw, and wondering, asked his airy guide, what and of whence was he, who pressed the hero's side? His son, or one of his illustrious name? How like the former, and almost the same. Observe the crowds that compass him around, all gaze, and all admire, and raise a shouting sound, but hovering mists around his brows are spread, and night, with sable shades, involves his head. Seek not to know, the ghost replied with tears, the sorrows of thy sons in future years. This youth, the blissful vision of a day, shall just be shown on earth and snatched away. The gods too high had raised the Roman state, were but their gifts as permanent as great. What groans of men shall fill the Martian field, how fierce a blaze his flaming pile shall yield. What funeral pomp shall floating Tiber see, when, rising from his bed, he views the sad solemnity. No youth shall equal hopes of glory give, no youth afford so great a cause to grieve. The Trojan honour, and the Roman boast, admired when living, and adored when lost. Mirror of ancient faith in early youth, undaunted worth, inviolable truth. No foe unpunished, in the fighting field shall dare thee foot to foot with sword and shield, much less in arms oppose thy matchless force, when thy sharp spurs shall urge thy foaming horse. Ah, couldst thou break through fate's severe decree, a new Marcellus shall arise in thee. Full canisters of fragrant lilies bring, mixed with the purple roses of the spring. Let me with funeral flowers his body strow, this gift which parents to their children owe, this unavailing gift, at least, I may bestow. Thus having said, he led the hero round the confines of the blessed Elysian ground which when Anchises to his son had shown, and fired his mind to mount the promised throne. He tells the future wars ordained by fate, the strength and customs of the Latian state, the prince and people, and forearms his care with rules, to push his fortune or to bear. Two gates the silent house of sleep adorn, of polished ivory this, that of transparent horn. True visions through transparent horn arise, through polished ivory past deluding lies. Of various things discoursing as he passed, Anchises hither bends his steps at last. Then, through the gate of ivory he dismissed his valiant offspring and divining guest. Straight to the ships Aeneas his way, embarked his men, and skimmed along the sea, still coasting till he gained Cogita's bay. At length on oozy ground his galleys moor, their heads are turned to sea, their sterns to shore.